IVM.
Artificial intelligence, what is that? It sure sounds like science fiction, but it's very much a part of our world today. But most of us lack understanding and a means to use AI to our advantage. Luckily, though, Intel's Digital Readiness Program empowers everyone with skill sets, mindsets, and tool sets to use in an AI fueled world, so you don't end up like me. The Intel AI for Youth program is an initiative that guides today's youth to an understanding of AI, how it is designed, and why it's important today. Intel's been working with the CBSE, Ministry of Education, and the Government of India to empower today's youth to build social impact solutions while demystifying what AI is. How do you take advantage of this? Purchase an Intel Core powered PC and you get free access to 80 plus hours of immersive and hands-on training about AI. On completion of the program, along with a certificate, you get access to AI toolsets to try put what you learn to good use. Log on to futurebanaowonderful.intel.com. Future Banao Wonderful by bringing home an Intel-powered PC.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast supported by Pragati, a flagship media initiative of the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like to bring fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and an Indian perspective to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hello and welcome to All Things Policy. My name is Rohan Seth, and before we begin this episode, I just want to say that we live in unprecedented times where evidence-based policymaking is of the essence. Having said that, before you listen to this podcast, and if you're interested in this sort of stuff, we are calling applications for Takshashila's short course on evidence-based policymaking corresponding to COVID-19. The course is 4 days, is stretched over 2 weekends, and introduces the participants to the various public policy aspects of managing recurring COVID-19 waves. It happens from 23rd to 31st October, and the last date for the applications is the 17th of October. We'll put a link in the show notes for the application, and without much further ado, let's begin. We have a pretty interesting episode for you guys today. I'm joined by Prateek Vagre, and we're here to talk about the Facebook files. I know you might have heard about this, dear listener, in the news or on Reddit or wherever. But let's have Sapni give us some context. Sapni, over to you.
So sometime last week and over the past 2 weeks, there have been a flurry of information that has come from an investigative reporting that the Wall Street Journal did. So essentially spread over 6 pieces of reporting, what Wall Street Journal tries to uncover what allegedly Facebook has been keeping under its rug for a long time regarding a lot of research that it has found out from its internal researchers on how there are various troubles within its system, particularly regarding content moderation and its effects on mental health, and furthermore, broadly on the health of Facebook platform itself. So this comes from a former Facebook employee by the name of Frances Haugen, and she then later testified in front of the United States Congress a couple of days before we record this podcast as well. So there are 6 parts to this report. The first part talks about how there is a special pass given, a whitelisting sort of happening with a certain set of elites within Facebook who are Facebook users. And this set of elites, they apparently are, according to these leaked memos and leaked reports from within Facebook, and that Facebook is aware and actively tries to shield them from its own enforcement of community guidelines and Facebook's terms, and also leaves up a lot of content which usually would not pass its threshold, but leaves it up for larger propagation. Another, very importantly, I think, would be Facebook's interest in kids and preteens, how that sort of shaped up. One of the reporting pieces talks about how Facebook itself knew how Instagram was a very toxic space for teen girls to be in with respect to body image issues, creating mental health troubles, ranging from body dysmorphia to causing depression and eating disorders, etc. And the other side was Facebook's interest in making its products more available and taking in users who are as early as probably 6 years or even preteens and even coming down to 6 years of age. They wanted these young users to join Facebook platforms through various products so that they could attract more users. They could expand to a newer set of users. Another one of them talks about how Facebook did very poorly on human trafficking and drug cartel issues, which were furthered through the platforms even when the employees flagged it. And this particularly is of importance because we understand that a lot of the efforts in terms of resources went into North America, while almost 90% of Facebook's users are outside North America. Another one of these report is on Facebook's platform health. Generally, how there was a tweak done on Facebook's algorithm, the basic algorithm that functions on that is the basis for the newsfeed curated newsfeed to appear, and that how Facebook tried to not push divisive content, wanted more friends and family content, but then ended up messing that up very badly. And then the final one is regarding one of Zuckerberg's pet projects of not having anti-vax content on platform, but that Facebook failed miserably trying to control that and preventing the narrative of anti-vaccination in Facebook. But essentially they could not control and they could not understand how their algorithm was manipulated and used and was essentially working on the space, on the social media space that they provide. And this is generally what Facebook Files is all about.
Thanks for laying that context. Neha. That's super useful. I want to talk to you, Pratik, about just the news cycle bit of this. So tell me a little bit about what happens when this story breaks and how this information is digested.
Yeah, so there's an interesting dynamic. It almost runs in a pattern for most Facebook related news now. Look, this applies more broadly, but it's more starkly visible in this case, right? So any news about Facebook tends to serve as some form of confirmation bias fodder, and you typically have groups that sort themselves into three groups. That people tend to sort it into three groups. One is that views every new piece of information, every news that breaks as just confirmation for their belief that Facebook needs to be more aggressively regulated, right? And I say aggressively in quotes because that can mean different things to different people. From say either having it broken up or regulated very very strictly, or in some extreme cases even not existing anymore as a company. Right. The second group, which is, as you'd expect, the one group opposing it, there's going to be a second group that defends Facebook or tends to tries to deflect a lot of the criticism. And then there's a third group, which is, it's people who are generally, I think, tired of Facebook-centric news cycles, who identified this pattern, and on this sort of mixes in with a group that also believe that if you focus too much on one company, there is a chance that there's you misdiagnose the underlying issue. So it's interesting to watch these dynamics play out. And anytime there's a very Facebook centric news cycle that breaks, the first couple of days there are a lot of hot takes. Many of them, okay, it'll be probably sweeping to say that many of them are bad, but they all come from these biases, right? So it's what I typically tend to do is wait it out a couple of days and then see what makes sense to me, from my own mental models of how I think about the company and this regulation in general. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. And, I think this is a pattern that we sort of observe time and again, right? When anything happens. There's another thing I want to add specifically for these reports, right? I think something laid out what's in these reports. There's also, so I think this was a thread by Samit Chakrabarti, who is, I think, the ex-civic integrity head at Facebook. I think he was there till December 2020. Right, he put out a very interesting try to contextualize these reports, right, and pointing out that look, a number of the reports that came out are from teams who look at harms, right. Simultaneously, what happened, the way Facebook responded was they tried to downplay these reports, right, and to that his point was that look, on the methodology side, while they might be some of them might be based in smaller sample sizes, these type of such research is normally instructive in the sense that it directs the future research propaganda, right? It points out a problem and then you have larger research efforts to investigate, the initial to investigate or or confirm the initial hypothesis, right? That you draw. And what this really means today is that, look, it's important to simultaneously not overstate or understate these reports, which, for the dynamics I pointed out above, it's actually harder to do that than it sounds. And it requires some effort and a lot of, wading through a lot of information, basically, to try and get to the crux of the matter. But I'll stop there.
Right. So this is really interesting. I do want to delve into the analysis bit of it. So the way I look at this is that this is this is not the first time an accusation has been levied at the company saying that, well, you knew that, you know, things that Facebook was doing was harmful, and yet you didn't do a lot to stop this. And a couple of instances sort of spring to mind regarding this context. The first one is regarding the whole issue regarding teen girls and how Instagram impacts their mental health. And if you look at the files, there's quite comprehensive evidence that I, I I won't go as far as to say causation, but there is a very strong correlation between bad mental health and how Instagram is being used in teen girls. And yet we have Facebook coming up with an Instagram for kids. Also, the whistleblower, I am not going to attempt to pronounce her name, if only because I'm going to do a terrible job at it. But she did say that she was part of the civic integrity team. As soon as the election was over, the civic integrity team was dissolved, and then you had the January 6 riots. So I guess the thing I'm trying to get at is that this is not something that's extremely new. I feel like we've gone through the script before. What is different this time around? Do you guys think?
Let me take a stab at that first, right? And then something can add. To an extent, I agree with you, right? There's not, I think a lot of the harms that have been pointed out, a lot of outside research has alluded to that in the past as well, and some of the harms is a lot of it also tends to overlap with what we published in our first document on the governance of digital communication networks. So in that sense, a lot of these harms were known. I think what's new is that, one, this is, Facebook internal research pointing towards many of those things, right? The other aspect is that it shows that that there was some contradiction between what company representatives were saying outside the company in various Senate hearings or Congress testimonies, etc. Right, where presumably under oath, they should not be misrepresenting the situation, versus what some of their own internal research was showing, right? And I think that in itself is probably is pretty significant.
To me, I think something that really stood out is how under resourced that part of Facebook is. So that's something that very blatantly the whistleblower tells, as well as it comes. So one of the reports that Wall Street Journal has talks about how there is a reducing power power sharing sort of within Facebook, and how the CEO, I believe, Sheryl Sandberg, sort of seems to be losing more power and having lesser number of people under her reporting to her, etc. But while I look at that, what I also see is that how there is more and more resource allocation towards the product, towards marketing, etc. Within this sphere that, like Pratik has mentioned, how there is already mounting evidence that Facebook is at least a space for a lot of social imbalance, a lot of social trouble. If not Facebook causing it, it definitely does amplify it. So while acknowledging that problem within Facebook through their internal research, and while a lot of external research also has acknowledged that, I think it is pretty telling that Facebook still did continue to not fund and resource that space enough to at least try from its end to reduce the harms as much as it can. So I think that is something relevant here, and that sort of speaks, right? That sort of speaks to the regulators, or speaks to the parliamentarians about how well Facebook is actually trying to mitigate the problems that its platforms have. And that alludes to the fact that it doesn't really help if Mr. Zuckerberg keeps saying that we are doing everything for the for the better of the rest of the world. We're trying our level best. That sort of doesn't stand in front of a public oath in front of the parliamentarians and I think in front of a larger audience, which sort of looks at it keenly.
I do want to add something. I think it's one thing that's important to add also is that Facebook does seem to be at least researching these things. Now, as Sapni pointed out, they may not be actioning it to the extent that many of us would want. Again, there's also a lack of consensus on how exactly they should go about doing it. But just to zoom out a little bit, right? And because we started off with the while prefacing that look, it's not always helpful to focus extensively on one company. It's also it's also interesting that it'll be interesting to know what stage of research other platforms are at, right? And how they approach these sort of harms that they're also presumably, bringing, or, their platforms are being used for, right? So I think that's also something to watch out for. I think those questions will emerge once the dust settles a little bit on, or the attention from Facebook moves away a little, but it'd be interesting to see how that part of it plays out as well.
Thanks for that. Let's take a quick commercial break and we'll come back and dive a little bit deeper into this.
Intel vPro provides the complete manageability tools to detect, repair, and protect your devices remotely, so your workforce can keep doing what they do best, wherever they're working from. Today, as most employees and IT teams no longer work under the same roof, fixing glitchy PCs and proactively managing the PC fleet has become increasingly difficult. The Intel vPro platform addresses these problems with its Intel Active Management technology, Intel AMT. vPro enables IT to keep mission-critical resources running by establishing a secure connection between IT and an Intel vPro platform-based PC. In the event of a cyber attack, Intel AMT lets IT remotely manage and repair systems simultaneously, even if they are dispersed across multiple locations. PCs can be recovered quickly wherever they may be. Plus, the Intel Endpoint Management Assistant, Intel EMA, enables cloud-based manageability using simple web-based tools to connect with and remediate any Intel vPro platform-based PC. Both these tools provide better manageability and faster response times, resulting in substantial device management support costs saving and fewer help desk tickets. Visit intel.in/IT heroes to know more. Intel vPro, built for business.
Hi, we're back and we join my Pratik and Sapni to talk about the Facebook files. I think we've talked a lot about what the files are, some of the implications. I do want to sort of direct this conversation towards India a little bit. So let's discuss the implications for India. Pratik, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. So let me just first, take a step back and just talk about the specific files, and then we see what other things that emerged for India, right? So in the Facebook files itself, with the articles that Sapni referenced, I think there were about 2 references to India, and 2 additional references in the reports that the Wall Street Journal put out, right? The first of these was essentially like a throwaway reference in the story about the newsfeed algorithm change, right? Which basically something in the context of how the changes to the algorithm are causing political parties to resort to negative content and and attacks, because that's letting them more engagement. Right? So it was basically a single line that said Facebook researchers wrote in the internal report that they heard similar complaints from parties in Taiwan and India. The second reference, interestingly, was in the very next article in the series about violent content, right? And it spoke about how there was a test account posing, a test account, if I remember correctly, Indian user who was female, right? And they basically said that, look, within, within a short time, there was, if I can quote, a constant barrage of polarizing nationalist content, misinformation, violence, and gore. Right. And somewhere else there was a reference of, I've seen more images of dead people in the past 3 weeks than I've seen in entire life in total. Right now, again, we don't know the full context of these, but that's essentially where these were referenced. But it's important to to put this in context of what the other points of made, right, in terms of enforcement, where I think they said about 87% of their misinformation enforcement efforts went towards North America, right, which is under 10% of their, or approximately 10% of their monthly active users. The next set of references were in the Instagram reports, right, of the mental health report, which which went, there were a lot of detail. Obviously, won't go into the whole thing. But India was an outlier, right? In two senses. One was that the appearance-based social comparison that they were talking about in India was actually worse among men than it was in women. And so in the countries that were listed on that slide, I think that seemed to be the case only in India. And of course, it wasn't significantly worse. It was marginally worse. They were very close. And the other aspect was about how, in general, right, body image issues in India are not a concern, or amongst at least the people that sampled, body image concerns were not a major concern generally. But on Instagram, they were significantly high, right? And I think the researchers left notes about how we should try and understand what went on, right? Now, in the other senses, there wasn't in the other theme, right? Now, while there weren't specific examples, it's again, it goes without saying that a lot of that applies, right? For like differential enforcement of rules, opaque kind of notifications to users, the discrepancy in time and resources allocated to certain countries. I think that theme played out. And I think lastly, there was also this point about lack of capacity in various Indian languages, or broadly non-English languages, which then translates to Indian languages as well.
Right. Thanks for that. Sapni, do you want to add something?
I think something that, for me at least, that stood out, and I think I'm pretty thankful for, is the fact that, so after the 60 minutes into the interview which the whistleblower gave, there a bunch of the complaints that were filed to the SEC, those were published by the network as well. So under that, India definitely, falls within the tier 0 country according to internal classifications that Facebook has, which is basically saying that those are spaces that you give adequate amount of attention to with respect to elections particularly. So that, I think, is pretty happy. I'm pretty happy about that, at least, that there is some attention going in that space, given that even during the times of Cambridge Analytica, India was a country that did feature within there, and in addition to Brazil and the US, of course. So that, I think, is particularly important. And that sort of efforts, probably Facebook is taking a stance in putting more effort to mitigate the problems it is causing outside of North America. But it again, it's contradictory to the fact that while one of the reports talks about human trafficking, it talks about how there was a ring busted in the USA, while something very similar happened, I believe, in Thailand. Similar ring they discovered, but nothing was done about that in Thailand. They did not even try to intimate about the existence of that ring to the law enforcement. So that differential treatment definitely stands, and that obviously stands true for India and everywhere, as Pratik has mentioned. But I think there is a possibility of improvement there from whatever I read, from Facebook's side at least.
Right. So let's sort of take this conversation now towards remedies, because a lot of what we've talked about sort of has done a good job in outlining the problems that we see with Facebook, a differential treatment that is given to different kinds of different regions. And sort of this brings me to, what exactly do you do to, if not fix, at least attempt to fix some of this stuff? And I know there's a bunch of stuff being talked about, like having chronological feeds or modifying Section 230 and so on. So let's hear from both of you on what are some of the solutions that are being proposed, and if you have a take on any of them.
Again, there aren't very, if I had a good solution in mind, I would be accepting a tech policy Nobel Prize somewhere, if it doesn't exist. But look, so one of the things that stood out to me, at least, and I'm potentially not answering your question, Rohan, but I just wanted to raise this point about, there's this tendency to look at analogies, right, in these situations. And there is this thing of, there's an analogy that we're likely to hear a lot of in the coming months or years, right, about big tech being big tobacco, right? And that's an interesting analogy, in the sense that I think when it started off, it was, that analogy was made from the perspective of, look, cigarettes have secondhand smoke, which have harmful effects beyond, just smokers. They affect the rest of society too. So in that sense, there was, in that sense, yes, you can see how it fits to an extent that, the harms flow outwards into different parts of society. You don't necessarily have to be, a user of one platform to be affected by, the harm in the information ecosystem and spawning public trust, etc., to be affected, right? So in that sense, it might make sense, but I think over time, what's going to happen is that nuance is going to get lost and it's going to morph more into, if that's not already happening, into, everything about these companies is harmful. And I think that's something to be a little to be a little watchful for it about. I think it's one thing to say that digital communication networks do come as, they are associated with a number of harms, to saying that, look, all they have is harm, right? And I think I think Laura Edelson gave this analogy in another hearing last week about pharmaceutical firms, right? Which is, again, it may not be, no analogies are perfect, but I think this seems a little more intuitive in the sense that, yes, there are various corporate incentives, there are harms, but there are also benefits, right? And I think that analogy made a little more sense to me. But yeah, I think specifically on solutions, I don't think we're going to see new solutions being developed, right? It's essentially the same sort of solution that get picked up, right? I think that the recent Senate hearing, there was some talk about a data protection agency, which is interesting. There was a bit of confusion over that. I think the senator who referenced it was talking about a data protection agency or an agency for misinformation, which are two very different things, right? And with two very different implications. But yeah, essentially, I think we're going to see the same set of solutions. But what could happen is that, look, it's reinvigorated, at least in the United States, it's reinvigorated the will to focus on Facebook, which has anyway been happening, right? Which is with the shift in the FTC, etc. That's anyway been coming. From an India perspective, and I realize, we didn't address this when we were talking about India, whether any of this will shift the tech policy discourse in India significantly at this point, at least what we've seen until now. I don't think anything dramatically new has emerged. Whether when it comes to preferential treatment, etc. We've seen all that in the past. That's already been reported on, right? So in that sense, there isn't too much new to go by. I will caveat that with saying, look, between the time we record this and the time this episode goes out, if there is, if there is new information that comes out, then we can disregard this bit of it. But at least what we've seen so far, which is as of roughly around the 7th of October, there isn't anything that I see shifting the discourse here.
Right. Sapni?
I think there's a general wave which sort of wants a solution right now. And that I think goes the same for the whistleblower as well. But probably something that we sort of miscalculating is that these problems are very, very complex. So a one-shot solution to this might not come out of the blue just because this happened. That said, there are, as Prateek mentioned, there are steps that are being taken in the case of privacy, looking at it from the privacy angle, looking at it from the competition angle. And those are necessary steps. And those steps, I think, can certainly improve a lot. But while that being said, I think something very coming up very nicely, for me at least personally, I think that's a very nice step coming out of these revelations, is how, and tying back to the question we started off earlier with how other companies are also dealing with research, and do they do research, internal research like this. There is an increasing momentum asking for more transparency from companies regarding their internal research and regarding what they know about their products, so that it helps people who try to regulate, people who try to research, etc., in coming up with broader and better solutions. And I think that is one move that is commendable, and that I personally at least am looking forward to more transparency from these companies.
Yeah, and I think there's already a draft proposal on that front. I think it's headed by Nate Pasili. But yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Right. Thanks both of you. I think we live in pretty interesting times, and I think we'll have more on this story as it develops. But thank you so much for joining us, and we will catch you in the next episode of All Things Policy.
If you liked our show, don't forget to check out other interesting podcasts on the IVM network. You can tune into them on the IVM Podcast app, ivmpodcast.com, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can also follow IVM on social media. The handle is @IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And hey, If you'd like to dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs, check us out at our Twitter handle at TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Paisa Vaisa, we have a midweek special. Anupam is joined by Chintan Haria, Head of Product Development and Strategy at ICICI Prudential AMC. They talk about the ICICI Prudential NASDAQ 100 Index Fund. What's it like to be a woman in the city? Find out on the Filter Coffee, where Vedashi Kambete Sharma talks to Karthik about her new book, Fatal Mistakes. On Audio Gyan, Shreya Satish, founder and CEO of OwnPath, talks to Kedar and Abhineet about how OwnPath was created to help professionals grow in their career through lifelong learning and professional networks. On The Longest Constitution, Priya explains how bar dancers are barred from dancing due to an arbitrary moral distinction in the name of public morality. And on Agla Station Adulthood, Ritasha and Ayushi discuss the hazards of chaos and the importance of appreciating silence. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our others for that matter, please do tell a friend. We really appreciate you spreading this. Word of mouth helps a lot. And finally, this week, we'd like to thank our sponsors, Cred, Bank of Baroda, Quarter, CoinSwitch, Kuber, Slay Coffee, and Intel. We really appreciate the support.
Namaste, this is Cyrus Brocha. I am part of the government cancel culture program to remove rubbish off all the different streams available. So what we have is all the collected rubbish we put together on our show. It's called Cyrus Says. It's on IVM Podcast. You have to watch it and listen to it. It's on our app. It's on our website. It's on the YouTube channel. It's on Facebook. There are many different ways. Don't bother me and ask me how. You have to find out. We talk to different personalities. Many of them are known. Some are just people we meet downstairs and invite them up for chai. But the point is, it's fun and it's very therapeutic. So please join in and listen to Cyrus Says.